Hello there, this is Democracy and the Rule of Law on Galaxy Television. It's good to see you again. It's another very beautiful Sunday afternoon. And it's a program where we treat topical issues from the legal point of view. So we look at law, we look at the Constitution. Yes, that's what we do here on Democracy and the Rule of Law. Okay, let's quickly take a look at what we're going to be talking about today. The Nigerian oil and gas sector has not witnessed any significant growth for the past 20 years due to lack of investor confidence in the sector. The group managing director of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation NNPC, Melekiari, said that these on Monday, January 25, on day one of a two-day public hearing on the Petroleum Industry Bill, PIB. The Speaker of the House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila, also has expressed disappointment with the inability of successive administrations in the country to ensure passage of the Petroleum Industry Bill, PIB, into law. He said it was difficult to explain why the bill did not pass despite collective interest by all for the passage of the bill. And meanwhile, the Senate President Ahmed Lawan said the National Assembly is now well equipped to ensure the passage of the PIB latest by April or May this year, as it has effectively tackled the bottlenecks that's been hampering it. The question is, why is there so many debates and controversy in this petroleum industry bill? This is what we're going to be talking about today on Democracy and the Rule of Law. Then we'll also be taking a look at President Muhammadu Buhari appointing new service chiefs to pilot the affairs of security in Nigeria. Lucky Irabo, Major General, as the Chief of Defense Staff. Ibrahim Atahuru, Major General, as Chief of Army Staff. Awal Gambo, Rear Admiral, as Chief of Naval Staff. And Ishaka Amao, an Air Vice Marshal, as Chief of Air Staff. But the controversy is he appointing them or is he nominating them for what? But what it's looking at is that he appointed new service chiefs. And can he do that without the approval of the National Assembly? Because they've started working. And that's what we'll be discussing today on Democracy and the Rule of Law. Once again, you're on to the show. I am Solomon of we'll go for a break. We'll come back. I have my guests. I'll introduce them and we will start talking. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Once again, this is Democracy and the Rule of Law on Galaxy Television. I have a barrister, Elvis Asia. He's a legal practitioner. Good to have you join us on the program today.
Thank you, Solomon. Welcome.
You also wrote a book, which one of the topics we're preaching today, oil and gas insurers and Nigeria's local content policy. Yeah. I'll definitely have to pick your brain, especially on this topic. Okay. And we also have Barrister Fred Latimer Ogenesive. He's also a legal practitioner and, of course, Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. Good to have you join us on the program again.
Thank you very much.
And from Ibadan, we'll be having a Zoom meeting with Honorable Olufemi Josiah, former House of Assembly member. Good to have you join us on the program today, sir.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Okay, it seems that we're having an issue with the connection there. When he's available, I'm sure he will be contributing today on the program. That's Honorable Olufemi Josiah, former Oyo State House of Assembly member, talking to us live from Ibadan. Okay, let's quickly go to our first topic of discussion, which is the Petroleum Industry Bill. I mean, a lot of controversy, a lot of debate going on. The making of the PIB started in 2000, when the former President Olusegun Obasanjo constituted the Oil and Gas Reform Committee, OGRC, and the bill have gone through a lot of reforms, a lot of metamorphoses, and it's like the more reforms and the more metamorphoses it goes through, the more controversial it becomes and it gets. We had the petroleum. The 8th Assembly was able to pass a part of the bill after it was broken down into 3 distinct bills, namely the Petroleum Industry and Governance Bill, PIBG. That was in 2016. The Host Communities Entitlement and Protection Bill in 2016, and the Petroleum Industry Fiscal Bill. So let me start with you. How all these collapse to be the Petroleum Industry Bill, and all this other plenty acronym tend to be seen here in the course of my research.
Well, I think the first thing we need to talk about is the fact that the Petroleum Industry Bill is quite an important legislation. Some of the interests you are seeing now, some of the controversies you are seeing, are basically expected. Because since oil was first discovered in commercial quantity in 1958, and since the 1969 Petroleum Act, Nigeria hasn't made a substantial change to the legal framework for oil and gas development in the country. And so around 2000, the idea was not to, fundamentally and drastically change, and reform the oil and gas sector. Of course, you know that over time we have had issues with the amorphous and rather opaque nature of the NFPC that has been running, government representative in most of the contracts in the oil and gas sector. And so the idea was to ensure that let us see if we can, formulate a commercial, oil and gas company like we have seen in some other parts of the world. For example, Saudi Aramco, Petronas, Statoil, which is now Equinor. These are major national oil companies in other parts of the world that are now investing in other countries. But in our case, on a yearly basis, we always record deficits, we always record losses, and there's much transparency in the way and manner the NFPC has been managed. So it was thought that it is good for us to fundamentally change the outlook of the industry with respect to regulation. There was also the call for a proper regulatory framework. What we have had in the past is that the Minister of Petroleum has always been so powerful. With the way the Petroleum Act was made. And this is why successive government, most presidents have, over time they would say they are also Minister of Petroleum because they didn't want to allow an individual to exercise those awesome powers that the Minister of Petroleum has. So, and the industry players, I've always thought that it's better to separate, policy from regulation, so that you can have independence, so that you can give investors confidence. So that was also part of the reason why it was thought, that we should formulate a new legislation. And thirdly, there are so many legislations in the industry, scattered regulations. In the course of my research on my book, which you mentioned earlier, I discovered that we have over 33 legislations on oil and gas, or related industry. And then you have countless regulations. And so, investors are finding it difficult to navigate through the web of all of these legislations and regulations. So
I can imagine an oil company coming in to invest and they give him this huge book of regulations.
And then you have to consult a lot of lawyers and pay so much money to understand, the current legal framework for oil and gas in the country. So this was, the background information that necessitated the legislation. But in the past 20 years, like you said, and particularly since 2008, when it was introduced in the National Assembly, it has not been passed because of vested interest. There has been so many irreconcilable differences.
Okay, we will talk about that because I'm interested to know the plenty debate and the controversy causing this. Barrister Latvia, let me have your own view of the PIB. What do you think it's all about?
Well, we all know what it's all about. It's to change the narrative. The Nigerians wanted a paradigm shift from the old way of doing things, which has slowed down the performance of NNPC.
And it is interesting because you're from the Niger Delta
Yes,
states, which
yes.
means you're like a direct
That's right.
connection to
Yes,
this bill.
yes, because the major focus really is to make the oil industry more interesting for investors. That is why they talk about the privatization of the NNPC. Then they also talked about the protection of the environment and the interest of the host communities. These are very vital issues.
All in the
PIB. They're also talking about the governance, that's administration, and then finance. Okay? So these four major areas constitute all the other elements and all the other attachments that you find in the PIB. And because the oil industry is the goose that lay the golden egg, everybody interest is there. The political shenanigans that you find around, the fight by politicians to become presidents, senators, and the rest of it. Those who want to become governors, they fight for that. Where people want to go to the National Assembly, the fast salary and remunerations that's attached to those positions, all comes from the oil industry.
Now, I'm also interested in the oil spillage. In the
Yes, I'm coming
Delta.
to the oil spillage.
So
Yes.
they're all.
Yeah, they are all there in the PIB, yes, the oil spillage. So far, we have almost about 10,000 spillages.
Wow.
Since 1950,
58.
58. Almost 10,000 spillages.
Wow.
And you can even see that
different oil and gas
different
company.
oil and gas flaring and all that. In fact, the Niger Delta is in a mess. That's the truth about it. And I'm sure, was it about the last National Assembly members, the senators, they visited, the Oil and Gas Committee visited the Niger Delta region. They entered boats and they went to the creeks. They came back weeping. They said, no, this is bad. How can people, where we take this money?
And yet they didn't do anything about it
these people are
themselves.
in penury. No houses, no potable water. The schools there are in shambles and all of that. And in fact, there are other international media organizations that came to the Niger Delta region to take reports, and they showed it to the world how the people there are in penury. And then you find that somebody in this country who is controlling the oil industry, e.g., maybe a minister, is in trillions of dollars. All right? Okay. So those regulations, the powers, like my colleague said, the powers that are given to the minister and to Mr. President and to even the committees in the National Assembly who are supposed to perform their oversight functions on all of these policies and all these things we are talking about, they are also soil their hands.
I'll leave your thoughts on that, because I'll be coming back to it. I'm very, very interested in the stakeholders in the Niger Delta, because a lot of questions have been asked. The 13% derivative that this oil stakeholders in the Niger Delta get for the development of that region, what do they do with it? So the problem isn't just from the federal government or the petroleum minister, but what about the stakeholders? I'll come to you. Okay. I've been informed that Honorable Olusegun Josiah is on standby. Good to have you join us on the program today, sir.
Good to be here, Solomon. Good to be here, Solomon.
We're talking the petroleum industry bill. I don't know if you can hear me. So let's have your thoughts on it. What do you think the petroleum industry bill is all about?
Yeah, the petroleum industry bill, it's a legal framework being introduced by government to regulate the activities of the stakeholders in the oil and gas sector. If you are aware, really being governed by the Petroleum Act of 1969 and the Petroleum Profit Act of 1959. And in over 50 years of the industry in Nigeria, there have been a lot of questions that are yet to be answered. For example, Nigeria is a major player in that sector. How come the country is suffering from what we call resource cost problem? Like the other people that have spoken earlier, how can people who are producing oil be suffering from the usage of the same products? how can the communities in which this product is being gotten, how can they exist in penury like we are witnessing in Nigeria? So in order to break loose from the resource cost classification, governments since 1999 have decided to introduce a legal framework that can correct all these anomalies. Now, the question we've been asking is, what are the major reasons why this has not happened? Like many people have said, there are political interests. There are serious vested economic interests, such that it appears as if the political class is only paying lip services to the implementation of this bill. It has gone to the National Assembly a couple of times. Just last year, the president reintroduced it. We are hoping that in this ninth assembly, we will be able to have a proper legal framework vis-a-vis the PIB bill, such that Nigeria can compete with the rest other oil producing countries, and we'll be able to get what we should expect from the industry.
We'll soon go straight to the debates of the PIB, but before then, let me get back to you, Barrister Ogenesive. What do you think? I mean, the 13% derivative, the federal government will have an argument concerning that. You know, the Niger Delta region, I mean, truth be told, they're not getting what they truly deserve. But the little they've been getting, there don't seem to be any change in the livelihood of the people there. I mean, if there's anything, it's even getting worse. So where are the monies going to? I mean, if I give you like 1,000 naira and you're not doing anything useful with 1,000 naira, how do I give you 1,000,000 naira?
Well, I don't know about other states, you know, because the 30% derivation, when it comes, there is a way it is channeled. Like you have the Delta State, you know, Oil Producing Community Development Commission, you know, DESOPADEC in my state. And DESOPADEC is functioning perfectly in my state. And the development of our rural communities is ongoing. And we have made remarkable achievement in terms of road construction, in terms of schools, in terms of, you know, primary health care, and all of that. And the governor himself is also putting a serious eye on the performances of the DESOPADEC. It's an independent agency, but the governor is also interested to make sure that whatever comes that goes to the DESOPADEC is well managed. All right. Now, you will not say of the same thing with other states, because every state have their own, you know, agency.
Exactly.
That's right. But, so I'm coming. Okay. What I'm trying to say here is this: that the 30% in itself is not even enough. It's not enough. If you want to transform the rural communities, if you want to, you know, bring about development in the oil producing communities, 30% is not enough. That is what we are saying. That's why the governors and Nigerians are also calling for you know, restructuring. Apart from this PIB, they're also calling for restructuring. Restructuring would mean that, okay, you are in charge of your, you know, of your mineral resources, and then you pay tax to the federal government, and then the administrative, the administration of your resources is within your region, okay, and then you are able to hold people accountable at that level of regions to say that, oh, this what we are getting, this is how we ought to have expended this money. But the way it is now, the money is in the federal, so the states go cap in hand to the federal government to go and ask for this money.
Now, I
and they are giving whatever they declare to be 30%. You remember recently that even the governors, they were at loggerheads with the NNPC, saying that the resources, the amount they are declaring, is not the actual figure. And that brings us to the issue of corruption. It is the corruption problem that has delayed the PIB for 20 years.
Okay, I agree with you there on the restructuring. Of course, you know, a different state and different region need to be accountable for you know, their resources. But there again, for now, there's no restructuring. So we just have to do with the system we have now. So in the meantime, why isn't it working? Because Bayelsa State is a mess. River State is a mess, especially those communities where you have those
I just told you that the 30% is not enough. The federal government must find a way.
Okay.
They must find a way to increase that 30%. You know, if you remember that time when there was this struggle, during the times of Chief James Ibori as governor of Delta State, he mobilized the SASA governors. You remember that time? And then they were going to the federal government to ask for resource control. You remember the resource control issue? Yeah. They were actually asking for 50% to come to the oil producing states. And it was prohibited to the point that they now start getting 30%. If you deduct 30 from 50 that they were asking for, can't you see the difference? So I believe strongly that if the federal government can increase it from 15 to about 20% or 25%, that will go a long way to facilitate development in the oil community.
Okay, let me hear your view, Barrister Asia. I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say here. I mean, the restructuring is not here now. So these people need to get their 13%, but even with the 13%, they don't need this, like some certain Niger Delta chieftains, in quotes, are siphoning the money. So what will now happen when they now become totally accountable for their resources? They are going to get even much more fatter, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, Solomon, I agree with you to the extent that, something is not right. With the way Amanan 10% is currently being utilized by oil and gas producing
communities, the states.
Because well, it's good to hear from another friend that the so-called data is working. But the general impression out there, and from our interaction with these communities, is that people really are not getting a feel of whether it's 13% or whatever percent. And of course, the issue is simple. There's so much corruption in the system. Apart from 13%, you are aware that we also have the NDDC, which is also meant to develop the region. And a lot of money goes into the NDDC. Oil and gas company contribute a percentage of their resources to that agency. And at the last investigation that was to be done at the National Assembly, we saw what happened when the minister said, "Look, it is you people as members of the National Assembly that gets the contract." I mean,
and in the process, even the ND collapsed.
So and then we saw the drama of. So I mean, that drama was just tells you what is really happening. There's so much corruption in the system. We have to tell ourselves the truth, right? But the mere fact that you give me 13 naira out of the 100 naira owing me, and I fail to use the 13 naira well, doesn't mean you should hold on to the balance. So the argument that the 13% you have got has not been properly utilized, that doesn't really answer the major problem we have in this country.
Okay, let me bring in Honorable Josiah. Let me have his view on that. So, what do you have to say about that?
On the corruption in the oil and gas sector. Well, all I have to say is that the citizens are not getting value for the kind of money that are being given to the governors. For example, the Niger Delta 13% derivative. If you traverse the entire length and breadth of the Niger Delta, in spite of the money the governors have received, you will not be able to measure the development on ground compared to the money. And if you look at the corruption that is being unfolded with the Niger Delta Development Commission, you will understand that some vested interest will not want this bill to see the light of the day. So by and large, I don't know how we're going to go about it, but the people of the Niger Delta are suffering from resource cost problem. They have the oil, but are they benefiting sufficiently from what is being obtained from the oil? And that is the question the petroleum industry bill, one of the questions it tries to answer. Another issue is the environmental degradation. If you look at what is happening in that area, there is a lot of degradation, environmental challenges. And we expect that by the time this bill is passed, it should be able to address those environmental challenges. But by and large, like other people have said, unless we remove corruption from the Nigerian enterprise, this bill might not achieve what it's meant to achieve.
Okay, now let's talk a little about restructuring. Now, does this PIB answer to a certain level the restructuring?
Well, the PIB is not really about restructuring. In fact, if you look at this current bill, I think we are trying to sacrifice the benefits that should ordinarily go to the oil and gas communities, in order to pass this bill. One of the reasons why they have refused to pass the bill in the past is because the people, I don't know, for some reason, some people don't want the Niger Delta to progress. If you look at this current bill, for example, the initial idea has been watered down. In fact, this current bill, as it stands, I would be surprised if people from the region allows this kind of bill to go through, because it doesn't really do anything. Because in the first place, initially it was 10% that was contemplated from the beginning that oil and gas communities should be getting from oil and gas companies for the purpose of developing the region. Right now, what you have is 2.5%. And the 2.5% is said to be on the operating cost of the company. And then how do you determine the operating cost? No information. There's nothing in the bill that will tell you that. So is it the operation from a particular village or from? So at the end of the day, there's going to be an issue there. And then there's a provision, a very dangerous provision that seeks to create a vicarious liability, a very dangerous vicarious liability for oil communities. Now, there's a provision that says like if third parties go ahead, for example, to damage oil facilities and installations, the communities will be denying these funds. That is, I've never seen that kind of thing anywhere else in the world. The third party could have come from anywhere. We know that we have sabotage in this country. We know that it is even possible for insiders within the oil companies, in government cycles, in security agencies, to be responsible for vandalism and all of that. So to say you want to punish a community for that, that is irrelevant. So at the end of the day, you see that the current provision, do not in any way, a manner, or form, answer to the yearnings and aspiration of the Niger Delta people.
So what about the oil and gas company themselves? This current bill, is it of any benefit to them?
Well, whether we like it or not, one thing I've always told people is that Nigeria was better. You see, when you are negotiating a bill such as the PIB, it's a negotiation. Though Nigeria has the power to make laws on whatever shape and form, because of the interest in the oil and gas industry and the development that has happened in the sector over the years, you have to consider the interests of the oil and gas companies, in actually making the law, so that you can create an investor-friendly environment. Let me just give you a background. In the last 5 or so years, about $70 billion have been invested by oil companies in Africa.
Wow.
Only $3 billion has come to Nigeria within that period.
Out of 70 billion.
Nigeria is supposed to be a major player. In fact, the highest largest producer in Africa. But we have only got 5%. Why? Because of uncertainty in the industry. And then now, many countries have discovered oil. Ghana, Equatorial Guinea, Mozambique, all of these countries. And then you know that shale gas has also, fundamentally changed the system. So the bargaining position of Nigeria has been substantially reduced because investors can go elsewhere. So as much as we want to get as much benefit from the oil and gas sector as possible, we have to. We don't really have a choice right now, but to consider the interests of the oil and gas company. One area where they are worried, which I share that with them, is with respect to deep water development. Initially around about 20 years ago, thereabout, when we made the law that was meant to incentivize development in the deep water. Deep water is like 200 water depths, above. All right. One of the incentives that was given to oil companies was that, look, if you go into the sea, deep water, to develop, to prospect and get oil, we will give you, if you are doing that in like a 1,000 depth and above, you pay no royalty. All right. But in 2019, that changed because I don't know if you are aware of the Supreme Court decision, which says that the federal government ought to have reviewed all those incentives, when oil price got above $20, okay? After that, we now amended the law. Though the law has been repealed now, not the PIB, the law will be repealed on the PIB, but the provisions have been sustained. But that is going to affect, investment in that, because it's a very risky business. You have a lot of, and it's a lot of high cost of production. So that is one problem for the oil and gas companies. Again, we're also trying to change the fiscal arrangement. Of course, Nigeria deserves to get more from oil and gas, but like I said, the current market, the current dynamics of the market puts Nigeria in a very difficult position. We want to, one of the challenges that we're going to have with PIB is that we have introduced hydrocarbon tax of 50%. We have also said, look, they will also pay company income tax of 30%. Initially, they were not paying company income tax. So that is going to affect, the way and manner they look at the viability of investing in the country.
That means it made it even much more stringent for oil and gas or investors to come in.
Well, they will have to look at it, but that's a major concern for them.
Okay.
But let me just quickly say that in making the PIB, I wouldn't want Nigeria to compromise on issues like gas flaring, domestic gas obligation, which is contained in the provision, and then the development of the host communities. But on the issue of the fiscal regime, on the issue of the incentives, we have to consider it, because right now investors can go elsewhere.
Okay, let me go to you, sir.
Yes.
Do you think this bill will work without restructuring?
Well, to some extent, it will work if there's transparency. And if we change from the old way of doing things. Because the bottom line is corruption. All of this we are talking about, from money till night, is just corruption. Payment of income tax, like you said, shouldn't have been a problem in an investor-friendly environment where there is no high-level corruption. You cannot eradicate corruption, absolutely. But when it is minimal, then it gives that avenue for investors to strive. But in this country, if you ask the oil companies to come and pay 30% company tax, and then the government officials and those who perform oversight functions are still waiting for the same oil company to come and greet their palm at the end of the day, by the time you add all of this cost together, then it becomes a problem. So the bottom line is, how do we address this issue of corruption? And I'm sure that was the reason why Nigerians voted for the APC and President Buhari in 2015, when they said they are coming to change the way things are being done. And when he came in the first few months, the fire was there, and we all saw it, how we were zooming money from tanks and all of that. And Nigerians felt that, okay, we are going to get it right this time. But for political exigencies, like for political factors, political considerations, you discover that it collapsed. And you now find out later that people who were even being investigated and charged to court by the EFCC, some of them now will now be made ministers. Even while those investigations are on, even when the court cases are on. In Edo State, you saw it recently, when a candidate of the party was already in court with the EFCC over issues of money laundering, and it was still presented as a party candidate, even ratified party candidate for that matter. So you see that the whole thing crashed. And right now, we are even more in a mess than we were in 2015. So if this PIB must work, then they must have a way. That's why I support the privatization of the NNPC to a reasonable extent. If we privatize the NNPC, all right, then the government officials are no longer there to piff and to control how the money goes in and out.
But the issue with the privatization is if one of those huge politicians buys it. I mean, we talked about this NEPA for years. And then we have the
we have PSC, Ikeja, and the rest of them will go to. Okay, but I think one way we can do this is this. Privatization is privatization. All right? It doesn't really matter who buys it. If we play the game, no, it doesn't matter who buys it in the sense that a politician can be an investor. You cannot say because somebody is a politician, he should not be a businessman.
But with their antecedents,
in fact, as a matter of fact, if you remember, that most politicians, before some people became politicians, they were already wealthy business people. They are there in the National Assembly. Some of them contested for governorship. But before they contested for election, they were already big people in business. Do you understand what I'm saying? So you cannot just say a politician should not be a businessman.
Okay.
But he has to, as a serving governor or as a serving senator, as a public figure, you have to resign your appointment for that organization, so that your power in government does not influence what happens in your company.
Okay. You know, I was going to say that even this bill doesn't meet, the general expectation that NNPC is going to be privatized. If you look at the bill, what the bill says is that within 6 months of the commencement of the law, they will incorporate NNPC as a limited liability company. And all the shareholding will be held by government. There is no transitional provisions for private people to buy into the shares. I can understand that can be done by policy. Government can just wake up tomorrow and decide to sell some of the shares. But in order to concretize the privatization, we should have transitional provisions in the law that allows government to, over time or within a certain period, transfer a percentage of the company, to private individuals.
Okay, let me go back to Honorable Josiah. So, do you think this bill will work without restructuring? Let me get your view on that. Okay, I don't know what's happening. We seem to have lost him.
So what I want to add to that issue is this.
Okay.
The four leg of this PIB bill is on finance, it's on host communities, it's on administration, okay, and it's on governance.
Okay.
Then in the administrative part of it, that leg, the couching of the legislative documents or provisions should reflect such a way that at least the administration of the finance and the general structure of the organization must be that the government influence in it will be highly reduced.
Okay.
But in our system,
in our system, is government that will say
appoint the shares. So that is when, and again, because the oil is the mono economy that we have, and everybody in this country is dependent on the oil, from the presidency to the local government council, then it becomes difficult to make sure that the management of this, these resources that we have is a bit difficult. Because if it's so stringent that the politicians cannot survive under that atmosphere, then of course there will be hula baloo, and that is why it is being delayed for 20 good years. One legislation for 20 years, and it's still counting. I'm not too sure whether we're going to see the end of the PIB in this year, but in the Ninth Assembly. But I hope and I pray that we're able to get
the sad news is that this delay has even reduced our ability to actually properly negotiate with the oil companies. Yes. In the last 20 years, they have moved elsewhere. They are investing elsewhere.
Okay, let me bring Honorable Josiah into the conversation. Okay, sir, let me have a view. This PIB, will it work without restructuring?
Well, if we want to be honest to ourselves, it may work if the major players want it to work. I'll give you an example. The existing law being used in the industry, a company can operate in all the sector, whether upstream or downstream. But in the new bill, if you want to operate in the sector, you have to be registered for that sector only. If you are going to operate in the downstream, for example, you have to register a company to operate in that downstream, unlike what we have now. But the question is, even if that happens, will Nigeria benefit from it if the operators want it to work? Like everybody else have said, the issue of corruption, it's something that restructuring might be able to address. I am not sure this bill addresses the issue of corruption, except the key players want to play by the rules.
Okay. Now, let's talk about the controversy. Now, the key players, we have the government side, we have the host communities, and we have the oil and gas company / the investors. Now, it is the clashing of these three key players that the main focus for the bill not being passed. So, who do you think are affected the most?
Well, I think everybody is affected. In the competition, in the fight to perhaps get the upper hand, just like what we have in Nigeria, in an attempt to outsmart another person as a Nigerian, we are all in prison. So it's the same thing that happened to PIB. Government wants to get a larger share without looking at the dynamics of the market, and that is making it very difficult for them to pass it. The investors too are also,
they need to have their say.
Have not been responsible enough to the host communities. I would expect the oil and gas companies, for example, to even on their own set up a system or a mechanism that would, develop the areas where they are operating from. I mean, they should. There's corporate social responsibility on the part of the investors. It's unfortunate that they haven't taken that very seriously. And so, at the end of the day, I think the competing interests, because both the three major interests will have to be aggregated, will have to be aligned in order for the industry to actually deliver what we expect. And the only way to do that is to come up with a legislation that effectively aggregates these interests. But like I said, I do not think the PIB as it is now, appreciates these dynamics of the industry. So I don't know whether the members of the National Assembly have the wherewithal, the requisite knowledge, information, and understanding of the dynamics of the oil and gas industry to be able to align these interests, because you cannot sacrifice one for the other. I'll give you an example. One of the biggest problems we have in the oil and gas industry in Nigeria is that the cost of production is so high that it is not comparable to anywhere in the world. In fact, we are saying that it's almost up to 40% to produce a barrel, $40 to produce a barrel. Wow. A barrel could. Meanwhile, if you go to Saudi Arabia, Brazil, and other places, it will be like $10 or less. Wow. And why is that so? One of the reasons is that because insecurity, and then vandalism, crude oil theft. Why do we have all of that?
Let's not talk about power where this company has to generate
you don't have
their
power.
own power.
Now, the oil and gas communities, for example, a lot of the people, I mean, it's even better now. Those days we used to see, much more organized fight against the oil and gas company, against Nigeria, in order to get as soon as possible for their communities. And then, of course, criminal elements hatched on that, and they started, doing all sorts of things. So if you really want to operate in a friendly environment and get all the benefits, then you have to take care of the host communities. So then if you want
the politicians too have their part.
Yes, if you want investors to invest, then you have to also ensure that the law is designed in such a way that it is investor friendly. It creates a great environment for people to bring in their funds here. I mentioned earlier how much we are losing in we have lost in investment in the last 20 years. It is unimaginable. And then on the part of the government also needs to get more. Nigeria, we have not gotten up to 50% of what we could have gotten from crude oil production in the last 60 years or so. Of course, you can't really blame the oil and gas companies for that. I think one of the reasons why that has been so is that the Nigerian government has not maximized, there's a value chain, all we have been concentrating on is we just get money from crude sales and all of that. But there's a value chain that you could have, that you could have invested in, and you need to create the enabling infrastructure. For example, we are trying to say, look, we need to ensure that oil and gas companies supply the domestic market gas. They prefer to take it abroad. Why? Because of pricing. Here, you want to force them to sell at 5 naira. I mean, they're a business. They rather take it to a place where it can be sold at market rate. So these are some of the issues, and we need to really sit down. I can understand the drive, the haste with which this ninth Senate or ninth National Assembly is trying to pass this bill. I can understand that. Nigeria has spent some money in the process, but we really need to sit down and align these three interests.
Now, finally, the host communities, seem that they have their own issues. I mean, like on the day 2 of the PIB hearing, there was exchange of blows, like these host communities. So, how do they rectify this, for this bill to move forward? Because if the host communities do not come out with one voice, it's going to truncate, this bill.
Yes, that is one very, a big problem
because it's like different communities and different states want different
That's
things.
right, and that was what was responsible for that scuffle that that we saw, the other day. I think it boils down to government failure in the area of security.
Even the host communities, they should have their say without the government interference.
The issue of insecurity in this country, it has become a very big problem. That it has overwhelmed even the federal government. And for that reason, the host communities have been the one providing security for the oil installations. And that is why you can find it in the present PIB that says that 2.something% will be given to them to secure, the infrastructure that is there. All right? And when you look at that, it will also create another problem. Because who is to bring the people that will secure the pipes? From government to government, from politician to politician. As somebody who is in the political system, I know that we have a lot of political leaders. And then there is a political family tree. I almost suffered a very big blow not too long ago in 2019, for doing something that was alien to the family tree, political family tree that I try to belong or that I belong. You understand? So that happens. So if a particular family tree has presented some people to secure the pipeline, and then the other family tree and the other leader say it is now our turn to go and secure, how do you reconcile that? So that is why I said that even for the failure of insecurity on the part of the federal government, the local communities have no business securing pipelines. That is purely a matter for the federal government, because the local communities they are not armed, they are not licensed to carry arms, are they?
And they are not trained.
And they are not trained. So how do you want them to secure it? That means you are asking them to use their diabolical powers in the locality.
Unfortunately, the time is really against us.
So, but again, let me just add this. The 2.something%, if they really want the security to be effective, they must take it a little bit up. I'm sure one of these leaders there said that it should be taken to 10%. And I think I support the idea of 10% rather than 2.something%.
Okay, quickly.
I just want to say
that
one of that interests we need to really consider in negotiating this bill is that crude oil is not going to last forever, right? With the way the world is moving now, we are moving towards cleaner energy, electrical cars. There are forecasts out there that in the next 30 years or so, oil will be playing a very insignificant role in energy.
And fossil fuel generally.
That. So this is perhaps the last opportunity for Nigeria to, get as much benefit as possible, and then, plan for the future.